All right. Okay. Welcome everyone to the annual Teaching Awards ceremony in a hybrid form. I'm Dr. Margaret Stuber, and I am one of the people working with teaching a lot in a variety of different ways, and I get to have the honor each year of presenting these awards, as well as chairing the committee that does the selection. And reading all of your letters and then being able to read them aloud to people as we present the awards is one of the great pleasures each year. So I'm going to go ahead right away and introduce Dr. Linda Ercoli. Okay, the first Faculty Housestaff Teaching Award. This is the Housestaff Teaching Award from the Adult and Geri Division. Goes to Linda Ercoli. To describe Linda Ercoli's mentorship style, a trainee quotes, "Leadership is not a formula or a program. It is a human activity that comes from the heart and considers the hearts of others. It is an attitude, not a routine. I have witnessed the myriad of ways in which Dr. Ercoli diligently and responsively engages with anti-racist principles and actions while teaching, providing love-centered patient care and addressing systemic barriers." A research fellow writes, Dr. Ercoli practiced what she teaches, and through this modeling of actively utilizing evidence-based practices, reviewing the most current literature, advocating for patients across disciplines, connecting patients to services, and conceptualizing patients within systems, she naturally engenders a passion for working with older adults. She carefully creates a learning space that makes you feel valued, heard, and safe to ask questions. You might have gathered that Dr. Ercoli is a geriatric neuropsychologist, although that was not in the leadoff as it is with all of the others. A colleague writes, Dr. Ercoli deserves this award for reasons well beyond the conveyance of knowledge. Dr. Ercoli unwaveringly puts her students first. She demonstrates that she is deeply invested in your professional growth, both for your own career success and in an agent to improve our institution, profession, and the clinical care of older adults. That implicit message is very inspiring to young trainees and instrumental to orienting us to meaningful careers in clinical services. Dr. Ercoli makes her trainees feel valued, both for their ideas and their commitment to clinical care, regardless of their level of expertise and knowledge. I firmly believe that Dr. Ercoli makes our department better, more just, more honest, and more welcoming to students of all backgrounds. She is a model citizen and mentor, elevating us all, and sets a standard to which her students aspire and expect of themselves. Thank you, Dr. Ercoli.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Should I move this a little bit? Is that echoing way too much? It's okay. Okay. All right. The next award is for Outstanding Resident or Fellow in Teaching. Usually these are people who've been nominated and supported by medical students because that's who the residents primarily teach. And in this case, the awardee is Dr. Kevin Kennedy, a second-year psychiatry resident. Good, he is here. Okay. He wanted to be here in person, but we're trying to have them up there and me down here. So, is this year's recipient of the award for Outstanding Resident or Fellow Teaching. A co-resident states, as I progress through my training, I have grown to understand that teaching is truly a labor of love. It is rare to find a resident physician who approaches their role as an educator with such commitment and intentionality. Dr. Kennedy inspires students, trainees, and colleagues to approach the complex work of clinical psychiatry with honesty, humility, and compassion. Looking forward, I have no doubt that he will continue to grow into an exceptional clinician educator, one who embodies the ideals of humanistic medicine. Kevin has routinely gone above and beyond to teach medical students at every turn, and it is clear to everyone that being an educator is his top priority. Another quote, I found Dr. Kennedy to be an outstanding clinician educator during my time on his team, rather than team on his time. Our service covered a challenging panel of acutely psychotic and manic patients who required active management throughout my 2-week stay on the team, an already challenging situation for any senior resident. A faculty member writes, I am confident that Dr. Kevin Kennedy will be a leader in the world of clinician educators and has already made an impact on resident education and all of the medical students that rotated through UCLA this year. He will be joining the clinician educator concentration next year, where his talents will continue to evolve. He is incredibly deserving of this award for the impact of his work in teaching this year. Thank you, Dr. Kennedy.
Thank you so much.
All right. The next award is for Outstanding Community Educator and is Dr. Elginer. Yay, okay. They just miraculously appear in back of me. I love it. Okay, Dr. Julie, well, see, what I would usually do is make sure that I'm pronouncing it correctly, but I don't have you in person, so I can't do that. How is your last name pronounced?
It's pronounced Elginer.
It doesn't matter. I can't hear it anyway. So I'm afraid we're going to go with Elginer because that's what I came up with. Or is it Elginer? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. We're doing miming today. Okay, Elginer. Dr. Julie Elginer is receiving an award for Outstanding Community Educator. This is a relatively new award. Dr. Elginer is an assistant professor in the School of Public Health. She helped co-design and conducts most of the teaching in our community and global psychiatry PGY4 advocacy selective. She has gotten rave reviews from residents for her teaching in past years. A graduate student advisor writes, Dr. Julie Elginer is knowledgeable and her diverse work experiences from biotechnology and pharmaceutical industries brings a unique perspective into the classroom. She utilizes unconventional styles of teaching. It's not solely based off lectures, but rather she places importance on student involvement, engagement, and student-led discussions. What I really respect about Dr. Elginer is that she enjoys showing knowledge, sharing knowledge and experience with others. She also shares best practices with our faculty during the monthly faculty meeting when all the faculty had difficulty with transitioning from in-person to Zoom, and then when transitioning back to in-person teaching and adjusting to hybrid like today. A faculty member writes, Dr. Elginer inspires her students and colleagues to excel in scholarship and to make a real impact on their communities in social justice. She has committed so much of her time, energy, and expertise to our psychiatry residency program without compensation. This award would show our appreciation to Dr. Elginer's work and demonstrates our program's support for advocacy and structural change. A colleague wrote, in both courses I took with Dr. Elginer, she was innovative in her assignments. She used them as an opportunity for students to create work that is ready to be showcased to potential employers. In these assignments, she would also provide incredibly detailed feedback that allowed us to grow and learn. Further, she always made herself available to us to come for help with both class content and any professional questions. Thank you, Dr. Elginer.
Thank you very much.
We could hear you. That was great. Thank you. All right. Now for our other outstanding faculty house staff teaching award that's from the Child and Adolescent and Population Behavioral Health section. And was Dr. Chung able to join us? No? Okay. I'm going to read it anyway because I know where she is, and she has a family issue going on right now, and I think we still want to celebrate what she has done. Dr. Jena Lee Chung is the recipient of this year's Housestaff Teaching Award for the Division of Child and Adolescent and Population Behavioral Health. Dr. Lee serves as the director of the Pediatric Psychiatry Consultation and Liaison Service to UCLA Mattel Children's Hospital and the Pediatric Emergency Psychiatry to the Reagan Hospital. She also serves as an attending in the Child and Adult Neurodevelopmental Clinic and as a staff psychiatrist at the UCLA Behavioral Health Associates. A colleague writes, in the 5 years, Dr. Chung has been medical director of our CL service. She has transformed the rotation into a premier training experience for our child and adolescent psychiatry fellows. She rounds with fellows daily, explains complicated consultation liaison and emergency department cases in real time, and has infused a sense of wonder, excitement, and curiosity in our trainees. As such, many have requested Dr. Chung as their ongoing mentor, and I give her all the credit for bolstering trainee interest in more acute care settings. A fellow mentions, every single trainee who has worked with her can extol her virtues without end. She is kind, compassionate, thoughtful, genuine, brilliant, and sincere. She cares deeply about our learning and about our development, not only professionally, but personally as well. Through each patient interaction, she demonstrates for us what it means to treat the most vulnerable with dignity and respect. Thank you, Dr. Jena Lee Chung. Okay, so the next one is usually somebody I know, but in this case, it is not. This is the award for Outstanding Volunteer Clinical Faculty Teaching. And this award is going to Carlos Saucedo, PhD. And I don't know if he is here. Is he?
I'm here.
He was. Ah, there he is. I saw you earlier.
I wanted to trick you.
This year's Voluntary Clinical Faculty Teaching Award goes to Dr. Carlos Saucedo. Dr. Saucedo is a faculty member in the Department of Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences who has devoted his career to training budding clinical neuropsychologists. So we have neuropsychology well represented this morning, both in full-time faculty and in our voluntary clinical faculty. Dr. Saucedo also has a thriving forensic practice and has mentored many over the years in providing much needed bilingual services within the medical legal arena. His teaching approach is trainee-centered, always making them feel welcome with questions and clarifying any doubts about brain behavior relationships. He is particularly fond of being an attending for complex pediatric bilingual cases, i.e. stroke, epilepsy, learning disabilities, where he spends most of his time reviewing crucial medical, behavioral, and cultural aspects of the case. He likes teaching about functional neuroanatomy and cognitive and behavioral processes. Dr. Saucedo is a highly sought out practitioner and educator, not only for his many years of experience, but also because he is highly eager to teach through a scientist practitioner model. Thank you, Dr. Saucedo.
Thank you.
The plaque will be in the mail. So the next is for Outstanding Research Mentor. And this year, the recipient of the Outstanding Research Mentor Award is Dr. Bonnie Zima. A former resident states, along the way, there she is. Dr. Zima has had a tremendous impact on my early research career trajectory. She has directly introduced me to chairs of departments, NIH program officers, national experts in pediatrics, public health, computer science and informatics, community leaders, youth advocates, administrative staff, advocacy groups, journal editors, and leaders of councils and committees of national organization. Dr. Zima gets around. A PI wrote, our grant is now entering its 17th year. Dr. Zima has been one of our 8-member core of faculty mentors for over a decade. She mentors many of the 18 annual trainees during our Research Institute, and then is a mentor for 2 or 3 each year, providing them with a year or more of additional teaching. Okay. A clinical instructor writes, it is abundantly clear that Dr. Zima prioritizes mentorship and helps UCLA live up to its goal of serving as a training institution. Not only is Dr. Zima an expert researcher and physician, but she is also greatly dedicated to teaching and passing on her knowledge to trainees. In being so committed to mentorship and education, she has become a great source of support and guidance. An entire fellowship class writes, early in the academic year, following input from fellows requesting examples of the application of research methods to the ascertainment of health disparities, Dr. Zima rapidly adapted the curriculum to allow fellows to select high-impact articles from a variety of journals and discuss ongoing scientific advancements in equity, diversity, and inclusion as a group. This flexibility allowed a learner-driven approach to the curriculum and brought a series of highly relevant articles attuned to shifts in scientific discourse. During rapidly fluctuating demand secondary to the COVID-19 pandemic and recent surge from the Omicron variant, Dr. Zima has been a tireless advocate for trainee exposure, not to COVID, but to research methods and learning in an environment fostering curiosity and camaraderie. Thank you, Bonnie. Dr. Zima.
Thank you, students and early career investigators.
Is a mentor for our junior faculty and some of our senior faculty. Okay, yeah. 2 more. Outstanding medical student teaching. This is my bailiwick, so I really want to make sure we get this. Dr. Nguyen. All right, so the recipient of this year's Medical Student Teaching Award is Dr. Sarah Nguyen. A current resident writes, Dr. Nguyen's contribution to resident education at UCLA Department of Psychiatry has been substantial. On geriatric rounds, both medical students and residents thoroughly enjoyed her. Dr. Nguyen also has an impeccable bedside manner and rapport with patients, which really improved their mental health outcomes. A medical student notes, Dr. Nguyen has both challenged me to grow as a future psychiatrist while offering ample guidance, which is a delicate balance that is difficult to strike as a teacher. She is a role model for the type of mentoring clinician I hope to be. Dr. Nguyen has been instrumental in shaping my medical school student experience, and I believe she will enrich the experience of many other students and trainees to come. A resident writes, Dr. Nguyen is an incredible physician, mentor, and human being who has served a very important role in my personal development. I first met Dr. Nguyen during my intern year when she was the geriatric psychiatry attending for Team Gold. She was arguably the most dedicated attending I have ever worked with, spending 20 to 30 minutes each morning teaching relevant psychiatric topics and psychotherapy techniques. So she does teach residents as well. And then a medical student reflects, By the end of our time together, I had a serious conversation with Dr. Nguyen about transitioning to a career in psychiatry, which is now a job that we are giving to her. On a rotation, I have yet to have a better teaching experience than I did with Dr. Nguyen. I was pushed to do my best duty and daily and was met with positive reinforcement. Thank you, Dr. Nguyen.
Thank you so much.
I meant it. She was nominated to me as a future mentor for medical students interested in psychiatry. So I have been in contact with her as well about that. The very last lifetime achievement, last award is the Lifetime Achievement Award. We do not give this out every year. And in fact, we don't even actively solicit nominations for this. But every other year or so, we have somebody that is so amazing that we decide that they qualify for the Lifetime Achievement Award. I think we have 2 in the audience right now that have gotten this. This year, the Lifetime Achievement Award goes to Rhonda Sena. So she is, I know she's there. Okay. Dr. Sena has served as a ward psychologist on the child and adolescent inpatient and partial hospital services for decades, and is possibly the longest serving training director for the UCLA Semel Institute Psychology Internship Program. She has served in that role since 1996. Within that role, she provides support and mentorship for a large number of psychology interns. Additionally, in her clinical roles, she provides direct supervision to both psychology and psychiatry trainees. A former trainee, now colleague, reflects, perhaps the most compelling aspect of Dr. Sena's approach is her ability to gauge your needs as a trainee and meet you where you are. Her disarming approach facilitates the primitive questions that need to be asked in order to build a strong foundation in the basics of psychodynamic psychotherapy. Each week, she listened intensely to my questions, concerns, and patient observations, guiding me with resources, presenting helpful ideas for formulation and approach, and infusing her larger-than-life humor that made each meeting treasured. I looked forward to seeing Dr. Sena, learning from her, and completely benefited from her perspective. In many ways, she is the reason I pursued child psychiatry. Trainees and colleagues alike respect Dr. Sena for her knowledge, skill, rational thinking, kind heart, and collegiality. She has been an important mentor for hundreds of past psychology and psychiatry trainees. It is the end of an era, and that is there because Dr. Sena is actually retiring, and really retiring, not like most of us retire around here, which means that they just step out for 30 days and then come back. But fear not, Dr. Sena is in private practice and is indeed the type of person you would refer a family member to. Thank you all so much for coming to the Teaching Awards.
Thank you.
At this point, it is my great pleasure to do what I guess we talk about doing, introduce a man who needs no introduction. So I won't say very much about him, but this is Chancellor Jean Block, who is actually a member of this department as well. And he will be introducing our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stuber, for that introduction. And it's wonderful to see all of you today, both in 3 dimensions and also in 2 dimensions. And it's great to be back to my department, which someday I will spend a lot of time here, but not quite yet. So our next segment of the, and by the way, again, congratulations to all the scholars who are recognized today. This is an extraordinary department and people provide really remarkable service, and it's nice to recognize those people that are providing the very best of what can be provided to society. So our next segment will focus on the critical subject of mental health and well-being. This is an issue that has come to the fore in new ways during the pandemic, and we see among our students now a really remarkable need for support, much more than before the pandemic, and I'm seeing that all over campus. This is one that has obviously powerfully affected Los Angeles, all of our communities, and UCLA has focused a lot of its energy over the past several years on dealing with these issues. So the topic is important for our conversation, and we're lucky to have some of the leading thinkers with us to discuss these issues. With that, it's my great pleasure to introduce today's main speaker, the director of the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health and a close friend of UCLA, Dr. Jonathan Sharon. So we're very lucky to have Dr. Sharon with us today. Dr. Sharon currently presides over the nation's largest county mental health system, an organization with an annual budget of $3 billion that serves more than 250,000 clients each year. Truly extraordinary. Since assuming his role at the helm of the department in 2016, Dr. Sharon has made efforts to streamline its operations, its systems of care, and its community engagement processes with a central focus on getting care to those who need it. He has directed funds to building crisis facilities, expanded prevention services, and implemented innovative ground-level projects throughout Los Angeles County. Dr. Sherin is also leading efforts to revitalize existing county-owned properties to create restorative villages that will offer comprehensive services to the county's most vulnerable populations. In addition, his work has informed California's mental health policy in numerous ways, bringing about the incorporation of new technological treatment paradigms and helping to reform outdated laws governing involuntary treatment. Dr. Sharon's work also has included foundational support for the LA Department of Mental Health and UCLA Public Partnership for Wellbeing. This was launched in 2019. The partnership is built upon our joint expertise to help mitigate the impact of traumatic experiences and promote resilience in communities, re-engineer governmental systems to engage and care for those in need, and revitalize policy to roll out mental health services more equitably. So this is really an ambitious engagement with UCLA, which we are, of course, very grateful. This partnership has engaged UCLA students, scholars, and practitioners across our campus. It's a wonderful example of how the academic community can partner with the county for the public good. Prior to joining LA County Department of Mental Health, Dr. Sherin was Chief Medical Officer and Executive Vice President at Volunteers of America. And before that, he served for over a decade in the Department of Veteran Affairs. He's also held a variety of academic posts, including those at UCLA and USC. I won't hold that against him. And in addition to his health and his leadership in health and human services sector, Dr. Sharon's made significant contributions to the field of neuroscience. And that's where I first learned about Dr. Sharon. He's known for his seminal research on core sleep circuits in mammals called the sleep switch. So that was my first introduction to Dr. Sharon, was actually through his work on sleep. He completed his undergraduate work at Brown, his graduate studies at the University of Chicago and Harvard Medical School, and a residency right here in psychiatry at UCLA. He has been a great friend of UCLA, a really important partner, and we're so deeply appreciative for all that he has done. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Jonathan Sharon.
All right. Well, gee, if I'd known it was going to be such a packed auditorium, I might have just stayed at home. But, you know, for me, it really is a pretty special thing to come back into this auditorium at this point after spending so much time here in training and seeing, you know, people that taught me so much, and even a few people that I like to think that I taught. And I'm really honored to be here in Mental Health Awareness Month, and just simply to be invited to give a grand rounds. I do want to start by making a couple thank yous. The fonts here got messed up, but I think this is an intervention from above. First, I wanted to thank the Board of Supervisors who took a significant chance on letting someone like me come into this role because I tend not to be quiet and I tend to push systems. And for some that can be uncomfortable. And I can at least guarantee that I have done that. We've achieved a lot and there's so much more that needs to be done, but we're moving in that direction. I also want to thank Gene Block, who, you know, as he said, I got to know a little bit as a fellow sleep researcher. And then in negotiations around the VA and the campus next door. And then obviously more recently, since I took this role, putting together this public partnership for well-being, which really allowed us to take these public entities and leverage each other for a whole new set of opportunities. And the relationship between the Department of Mental Health and UCLA increased, I think, 30-fold over the past several years, which is a pretty big deal. And it's very, very focused on upstream interventions and impacting those who have suffered for long, long periods of time and helping to build up our infrastructure, including our pipeline for staff, as well as policy changes that are really, really critical. Tricia Lester, I also want to give special thanks to with the large TL. You know, Tricia has been the point of contact, the director of this partnership, and has been literally amazing. And it's not just with this department, it's across different schools, which is a big deal because it's not just about treatment. It's not just about mental health care. It's about well-being, which is a much, much broader umbrella. I do want to say that all of the work that we're doing, I would say this in the county and I would say in this partnership, is really, really incorporating and focusing on inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism. And this is a critical point in time where when we look at mental health, when we look at behavioral health services, we have to take that lens, recognizing that systemic trauma in and of itself is a massive risk factor for behavioral health problems. So if we don't do that up front, we're missing the boat. First thing I'll say about coming into this department, and I don't mean to say this in any way that that reflects poorly on the prior administration, I had to do a lot of kind of fundamental work. And I would say that really our field in many ways, in the public sector in particular, is really a straggler. We're somewhat of a sidecar in the medical field. And we're seeing that right now, and I think we're paying the price. But I had to reorganize the department. The department is very fragmented. It was focused on where the fund's coming from. It wasn't focused on the needs of the people in the communities as much as I think it needed to be. And it had to be consolidated and consolidated around functions. That may sound like a fundamentally simple principle, but getting something like that done in this kind of a bureaucracy, no simple feat. I think it took me actually 4 years to get approved for the reorganization of the department. To repopulate it, you know, there are a lot of people who have been in government for a long period of time, and you know, in order to push for change, you really need people who are going to be able to take risks, who are going to want to see things and be able to see things differently. And it's not that people that were there and that are there now want that or don't care. It's a matter of figuring out how, as a group, you push and you don't rely upon things like that's the way we do it. Early on, I established that if you said that to me, there was probably going to be a problem. And then the culture, a very top-down bureaucratic culture. And I wouldn't say we're anywhere near where we need to be, but in a system like this, it needs to be grassroots informing grass tops so that you can maintain fidelity with your supply and demand analysis. I want to talk a little bit here about the strategy, and we have a relatively short, probably 30, 40 page strategic plan that I put together over several years, and it's kind of summarized by this slide. And you know, I like things simple. I'm a lumper, not a splitter. And what you see here really are 4 different domains. The domain of infrastructure, which is really that scaffolding that you need in order to hold together and drive a system. Community services. This is really our North Star. This is looking at social determinants. This is looking at access and prevention. It's looking at community voluntary treatment. We know that people don't always receive care and services in the community for lots of reasons, including the fact that our capacity is nowhere near where it needs to be at this point. But that's where we want to engage everybody over time. And then the crisis system, which for me is really a guardrail around communities so that when people deteriorate and are in crisis, we can connect with them, get them into treatment and stabilize them and bring them right back into the community in a way where they have a better chance of actually staying. And we know that individuals who have particularly severe, persistent mental illness, with or without addictions, that falling out of the community in a jurisdiction like LA County and many others, particularly urban environments, is really way too frequent. And it's unfortunately more the norm than the exception. And then our reentry initiatives. So we know that people who fall out of the community, who don't get access to crisis services and return to the community, will fall into what I call the asylum of our times, the outdoor asylum of the street and the closed asylum of our jails. And I talk about this not just about the adult population, but kids. Kids that are bouncing around foster care and the child welfare system are essentially homeless. And kids that are in juvenile probation, they are incarcerated straight up. And those are environments that are entirely unacceptable. And then the client flow. So obviously you want people in the community. Sometimes they come back from crisis care, and sometimes they'll come directly from the reentry initiatives, and in many cases with a pit stop in the crisis system. So here, when we look at the scaffolding, I just have, honestly, there's so many things going on in this county, it's hard to even begin describing them. But this morning I woke up early and I went through those that were on the top of my mind, and I want to just describe them for you. And many of them are long-standing. We've been working on them for years and years. Some are newer, some completed, some in process, and some planned. The first really relates to finance. And all I can tell you, and I'm sure that you all are aware of this because you try to deal with organizations like the Department of Mental Health in LA County, but you also deal with insurers. And what I can say is it's unbelievably complicated and unfortunate. And in many ways, it can be super constraining. So the millionaire's tax, Prop 63, right? Also known as MHSA, Mental Health Services Act. This is a really amazing thing that was put together, I believe, and passed by the voters in 2004, because it brings funding, a lot of funding, right now, $500–600 million a year into the Department of Mental Health for just LA County, almost maybe $3 billion to the entire state. But it's bucketed, fenced money. It's categorical. And it's very, very process heavy, reporting heavy. So using that money is not a simple feat. And when I showed up in the department, after being there for about 5 months, I learned that we had about $240 million that was going to revert to the state. So I spent a lot of time in Sacramento, lobbied a lot of people. We ended up getting a bill, AB 114, which held us harmless. That money stayed. And we're still trying to spend it because some of it's not easy to spend. But the big thing, and this is happening now, is an effort to refresh that funding stream and the way that it's used so that it focuses not on particular allocations for particular types of services, but outcomes. So what are the outcomes that you want to achieve with your $500 million or $600 million that you get per year? And I would argue something like decrease the number of homeless folks with severe persistent mental illness by 10% per year for the next 5 years. Hold me accountable to that. Don't tell me how to spend it programmatically. And don't make it dependent upon charting that at the end of the day exhausts people leads to bad audits and then recoupment of money. Just help us out by telling us what are the outcomes that you want to achieve and let us go after them with respect to prevention. Instead of having a set of programs that qualify as prevention, how about decreasing the number of students who disenroll from our community colleges, 250,000 students, by 10% per year over the next 5 years because of a mental illness? And that data exists. Those are the kind of things that will transform our ability to do the work, where we get to determine what are the interventions, whether it's a psychiatrist or whether we're focused on other things. You all are, I'm sure, familiar with the Institute for Mental Disease Exclusion. And if you're not, I'd recommend reading about it. This is a big issue. What ends up happening to us now, and was based in some really, I think, great intent decades ago, is that we're unable to send individuals and have it paid for to longer term intensive treatment. That money comes entirely from the county and some from the state, but none from the federal government because of that exclusion. And we're working very hard with both the state on a waiver and the federal government on a repeal. Grace Napolitano has authored a bill that we helped create to achieve that. And you can imagine if you have federal participation and you have an IMD here, we would be able to split the bill with the federal government. We'd be able to double the number of beds that we use in that context. That's a big deal. And I would say it's also a big deal because the exclusion, in my mind, does not respect and honor parity laws, which exist at the federal government and at the state. But people that need intensive treatment over longer periods of time have to be funded, whether it's through the public sector or the private sector. We certainly do that when someone has, chronic kidney disease where they're dialysis dependent, or someone that has CHF that's so bad that they have to constantly come into the hospital. When are we going to start doing that in behavioral health? We have to start doing it. And I think that is becoming clearer and clearer. Another one that relates to finance is the boarding care. Boarding cares are really fantastic places for people to live who have serious mental illness. Some of them will serve not just a housing function, but a family function for people who don't have either and who can't reconnect with their family for a variety of reasons. And that inventory is disappearing from our landscape right now because it's a broken business model. The amount of money that comes into the boarding cares is inadequate for the boarding care operators to continue. So what do? They sell them and they make tons of money, just as a real estate investment. And that's a big problem because those sites are really precious. Not only are they there and are they providing services, but they're in neighborhoods. And when you lose the site, you lose the site, because then you come back up against NIMBY and these other things which are so challenging. So at the state and federal level, we're going after the concept that housing subsidies should be available for the board of the boarding care. And the Social Security rate, which is about $1,000 for someone with mental illness, $3,000 for someone with developmental delay, is not all right. That it needs to be, let's say, $3,000 per month for someone who's there with a serious mental illness. I don't want to bore you to death with financial challenges, but those are just some that are really, really high level and really, really important. I also just want to let you know that on the contract side, we have done a lot to centralize the way that we monitor our contracts. That had never been done. I mean, that may not seem like brain science, but in a government system, making it happen is quite a challenge. And we've made a lot of progress there, because what we want to do is we want to provide customer service to the people who we pay to do the work so that they can be effective in doing that work. That's why we're paying them. And they can't do that if they don't have a lot of support from us as the payer. And we're doing that with our full service partnership programs, which you may or may not be familiar with. We've done that with a lot of help from the Balmer Group, who gave us a bunch of funding to bring in outside consultants, and a tremendous amount of work from Dr. Beth Bromley and UCLA through the public partnership. In terms of contracts with hospitals, we have nowhere near the number of beds. Everybody knows that. Take a look around. So we have increased the number of beds in LA County by 200, and we're running out of money. And we're establishing, as of July 1st, new performance requirements for contracted treatment beds. And our hope is, and we're getting very close, that UCLA will be a participant, so that UCLA, in the spirit of the work that certainly Gene Block and I have engaged, will be providing that level of care to the public, to the safety net, which is a fundamental responsibility of public institutions. And as you move at UCLA towards a mental health, behavioral health campus, this is really, really critical. So I applaud UCLA, and I'm really looking forward to having those contracts established in a uniform way across this county, so that we have a network that we, the Department of Mental Health, as a plan, can operate much, much more efficiently. The last thing I'll say about contracts is that we've developed an Incubation Academy. The Incubation Academy is designed and funded by us and philanthropy to target small grassroots organizations that would never in a million years be able to contract with us for things like they don't have an electronic medical record, they don't have any of the kind of finance history that they would need. And we bring them along over a 5-year period so that they can become contractors with the Department of Mental Health, if that's what they still want to do after that academy. And some of them are actually finding it to be quite difficult. I would say it should be a two-way street where we become much, much easier to contract with. And that's a bigger challenge, but it's something that absolutely needs to happen. In terms of workforce, we really spearheaded SB 803 and its iterations before, which were the peer certification bill, so that individuals with lived experience would be hired by the public system, and we would receive funding from the federal government for it. So that's a big deal. And as we look at the future of mental health services, behavioral health services, we absolutely must incorporate individuals with lived experience, the peer movement, inform it from the inside out, improve engagement, decrease the fear that people have and the trauma that they experience when they don't feel welcomed into the system, which is fundamental. We've also done things like loan repayment. That only took 3 years. So we pay psychiatrists who come in $250,000 over 5 years to stay with us. And our hope is that they would obviously continue. $50,000 a year, not bad. I don't know what they do here at UCLA, but if there are psychiatry residents listening, give us a call. We're up there, I think, with Kaiser. And then reclassing a lot of positions in this department. I mean, the department in some ways is really underclassed in terms of the types of staff and the payment reimbursement that people get for doing the work. Tons and tons of training, trauma informed. This is a big part of the partnership across different departments, across provider groups, to help get our system upgraded in terms of the way that it delivers care and understands individuals in the public system whose primary problem has been a history of trauma and repeated chronic trauma. And if we don't understand that and we can't engage through that lens, we'll never be able to help a significant portion of people who access the public system. We've done a bunch of things with technology. I know that UCLA has been a pioneer in transcranial magnetic stimulation. We're the first public system to have transcranial magnetic stimulation. We had it in one service area. That's moving out to all 8. That's taken 5 years. And a beating in Sacramento about it as a methodology. And then the last thing I just want to tell you about on the infrastructure side is stakeholder engagement. When I showed up in the department, it became very clear to me that the department, who by law must engage with stakeholders, was engaging with many, many people who dominated conversations that were the contractors and actually people within the department. When actually what you want is you want to hear from the grassroots. You want to hear from the people in the communities who are getting served, their family members, advocates. So what we did was we took a relatively small engagement process that was the same people again and again, and we broadened it so that we now have a very, very robust stakeholder engagement process across the regions of the county and across underserved groups. And there are many, many people who would be here probably quite vocal with me about how bad it is and how we don't listen. But our efforts were to listen, and we're listening to many, many more voices, and we're incorporating them into how we as stewards of taxpayer dollars are pushing out funding. Okay, finally, the community. It used to be when I talked about the strategy, I would just start with community and just go on and on and on and have the infrastructure at the end. But the fact of the matter is the infrastructure is so broken and so inadequate that now I put it up front just to let people know the kinds of challenges we face that limit our ability to deliver services. And as I had said, the community for me really is composed of three fundamental pieces. And one of the things that I talk about a lot in terms of serving people with mental illness, behavioral health problems, is that while treatment is important as a tool, it's about people, place, and purpose. Everyone needs people in life, whether it's their family, their kin, their friends. Everybody needs place in their life, a place to live, a place to recreate, a place to relax. And everybody needs purpose in life. Because without those things, you really don't have a chance of flourishing. And treatment, and I say this to psychiatrists, and some, I think, look at me a little bit odd. The pharmacologic tools are tools that will help people get access to stable people, place, and purpose. And if we can really, really look at that and focus our efforts on that as fundamental and have outcomes related to that, recognizing that there are other tools, I think we'll be advancing our system significantly. In terms of social support, the social determinants of health, as I had said, we're doing a lot on boarding care. We're doing a ton for housing. There are new housing projects everywhere. I would say that it's very unfortunate, the situation right now in our communities, the number of homeless people, the fact that we don't have near enough housing, that we're 500,000 units short of affordable housing, which is a travesty, and that we're actually probably heading in the wrong direction for lots of reasons, including increasing health disparities thanks to COVID. But the department is doing a lot. We're housing a lot. We're paying a lot of money for more units. We're also really developing more and more interim housing solutions, including triage housing that I won't get into. We're very focused on increasing supported employment, IPS model in particular, occupational therapists. You know, if you want to focus on people having purpose, occupational therapy's got to be a fundamental focus. And when I got to the department, I think we had 6 OTs. It's a 6,000 person department. That's not okay. Also, things like peer enterprise. So individuals who can generate products, who can be active in their communities, to bring added value into their communities, and us figuring out ways to support it the way that happens in other parts of our country. Prevention. This is a big area of support from the public partnership. We look at convening areas or points in our communities as access points. And one of the big ones would be obviously the schools, although we also focus on the parks and the libraries and other departments, for example, DCFS. But if you just look at the schools, if we are able to train up the schools so that they understand more about mental health, and then we have people who can help identify individuals who are struggling, and then a system for getting individuals who are not well navigated through the system, which is a maze, and we all know that, that's a big deal. That's a big prevention effort, particularly when you look at the schools. And I will say, in partnership with UCLA, we have been a major funder of the Depression Grand Challenge at East LA Community College in particular, where we've got a tiered model to engage people, to identify people who are not doing well, to engage them virtually, step it up to peers, and then eventually step it up to direct treatment. And if we can take that kind of a model to scale across our school systems, it'll have a massive impact on the people who are going to end up without access in their streets, in their jails, and in child welfare and in juvenile probation. And getting to people early isn't just about treating the illness early and not allowing circuitry to consolidate. It's also about the engagement piece, because when individuals benefit early in life from care, they're more likely to engage that care. If it happens later in life, it's often in the context of a police intervention, and it's a trauma. So if you're traumatizing someone, you're losing engagement, credibility, and that's not okay. And it's a big, big problem in our field. The last piece of community treatment. So you might think, oh, gee, John's a psychiatrist. He's a treating clinician. And I leave it for last not because it's not important, but it is a tool. And we are doing lots and lots of stuff in our department to create standards for treatment, to have bona fide interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary care. And you might think, well, why doesn't that exist? Well, it just doesn't. And it exists in little pockets. So making that standard across an organization the size of LA County Department of Mental Health is no easy feat. You all may be familiar with Trieste, Italy, and the Trieste Innovation Project, which has been renamed Hollywood 2.0. I call it H2O. This is a great opportunity for us to demonstrate what's possible by having an array of services that are inviting, that are easily accessible, where you don't need an appointment. You show up because you're a part of a community that has places for people to sleep if they don't have a place to sleep, that's got clubhouse activities, which is, in my mind, a bit of a dying art and a way to engage people and keep them engaged. It's got social enterprise all day long, where the Hollywood community businesses are stepping up to give us employment opportunities, supportive employment opportunities, where landlords are stepping up to say, we're gonna make apartments available to this project, knowing full well that with that array of support, they will be making a good investment. I mentioned the crisis care and the crisis system earlier. And what I'll say about that is, and some of you have been involved, including Eric, in our efforts to create a bona fide crisis system in LA County. Now, right now we have this, I would say, relatively meager ability to respond with the Department of Mental Health, PMRT. There are other mobile crisis efforts. There's a meager number of beds. I would say that the number of crisis teams and the number of receiving facilities probably needs to be increased fourfold. That's going to happen over maybe 10 years if we're really persistent about it. We're studying it. The Board of Supervisors has been driving this, and I've been working with them for about 5 years on it. And obviously, with all the social unrest and justice reform, this particular effort has a ton of momentum, and it's not going to stop. And it's going to make a huge difference, because it's going to end up keeping people out of the streets, out of the jail, and from revolving door at hospitals. It requires a regional call center. I mean, there are literally hundreds of call centers. I mean, it's confusing enough to just have 911 and then to have all these other call centers. You all are probably aware of 988, which is coming on board as a mental health crisis line July 15th. That's going to require a lot of technology. We will be probably ready with a consolidated call center within a year or two. But we're right now just trying to simplify it and make it user friendly, so that if someone does call 911 and it's a health and human service issue, they go over to 988. We deploy a crisis team of health and human service workers and actually relieve law enforcement of a burden that they've been carrying for way, way too long. I'll also salute UCLA and the public partnership for the well-being line. During the heat of this pandemic, we had a lot of staff in the department and across the 111,000 family members of LA County. And UCLA stepped up, created a well-being line like that. And that was used by staff in the county as well as providers around the county to get them real-time help. We've developed Therapeutic Transport. I don't know if you've seen this in the paper. I know there are a lot of efforts to do similar things, but we have vans that are not only staffed with a peer, a clinician, and a driver who's in a separate compartment, but have telepsychiatry and can transport people when it's not an issue of safety where law enforcement are required, or physical health when we use an ambulance. Right now, we go into the field without the capacity to transport people, and we can wait 4, 6, 8 hours. So our staff are tied up with that. They can't respond. And then you've got a client who's like, you know, I don't think I want to stay here much longer. I'm just going to split. So this is a big part of innovating on the crisis side to attend to real-time health and human service needs with real-time health and human service supply. The receiving facilities, which I told you are totally inadequate. We have about 10 crisis stabilization units, also known as urgent care centers. We probably need 40. We also need to have them in proximity to crisis residential treatment programs and peer respite programs. So those of you who are familiar with those terms would know what I mean. But the idea there is when someone's in crisis and they don't have a place to go that's safe, you don't want to take them to an emergency department necessarily. You don't want to get them admitted to a hospital, and you certainly don't want them going to jail. So we have to find places for people to stabilize, get care, get plugged back into the community without the morass of all those expensive and overburdened other systems in inappropriate environments. Reentry. I told you about, you know, what I call the asylums. Well, these are efforts to bring people out of the asylum and into the community. And there are many, many at play right now. One of them that I'm very, very proud of is the home team. And I don't know if you've heard about it or if you've read about it, but it's our homeless outreach and mobile engagement team and teams. And this is a growing network of staff working with our public guardian to get into the field and identify people who we say are not living safely in the community. Now, right now, the only criteria you can use for someone to get them longer term care is food, clothing, and shelter. Food, clothing, and shelter for me and for our department, for our board of supervisors, are indicators of not living safely in the community, but there are many others. And those others need to be incorporated into the law, we would argue, if we give people guaranteed resources up front when they're not living safely in the community. That includes housing, it includes 24/7 care, and what we like to call FSP 2.0, which is the performance-based incentivized services that I was mentioning earlier, and access to an open bed. And the home team comes out with what I call the home platter to people who are not living safely in the community, homeless, many of them for years, some decades, and will engage relentlessly for months. And when we can engage voluntarily, we then step up in terms of engagement tools of more and more strong intervention, ultimately a conservatorship. And we do it in the street. So one of the blessings of COVID has been the advent of telehealth, but also teletestimony. So you can imagine when someone shows up for conservatorship after being in the hospital for 6 months at great cost, they're getting medicated, they're showering, they're eating well, they're getting coached about how to get out of conservatorship. And then they show up and then the judge is like, oh, well, okay, you seem okay. Return, and there's no need for an intervention. And in many of those cases, people will return to the street and they're not going to comply with care. I believe in people having autonomy, and we want everybody to have autonomy. We want everybody to recover, but we know we need to get people access to services in an ongoing way in order for them to recover and to develop autonomy. So when we have someone in the street and we can, through teletestimony, communicate their conditions to the judge, to the jury now, because there are a lot of juries involved, it's a much more compelling argument. It's actually much more accurate information about how someone is actually living. And that has to be incorporated into our laws and the way that we do business. There are things right now that many of you may be aware of, like the Sanchez ruling, which actually don't allow medical records to be included in the courtroom unless they're represented by the treating physician. And we know about the treating physicians. I mean, I remember it. I remember driving down the 10 at 90 miles an hour and back from here and from the VA just to be there. And then you sit there for 6 hours. So teletestimony, bringing in other information that's relevant to that person's ability to live safely, critical. The home team and this home pilot is bringing a lot of that information, a lot of that movement to the state, and it's being deliberated right now. And those of you who are following care courts would know that the care court is actually, that a lot of care court is consistent with this model as a way to get people to engage in the system who are not engaging and are languishing. The last thing I'll say about that, and this is one of those areas that I could just go on forever, is that the key is to recognize that you don't take civil liberties unless you have resources guaranteed. And that after failing with endless engagement efforts and offering of resources, that's when you start to engage someone on the involuntary continuum. The last thing I'll say about the reentry initiatives relates to veterans. We've created the Veteran Peer Access Network in LA County, which is an effort that I actually was involved in way before I came to the county in different jurisdictions around the country, where we hire veterans to be ombudsmen, navigators, battle buddies for their military community members who are in the community not doing well, with a focus on homelessness and suicidality. And right now, I think we're getting up towards about 100 veterans that we are either employing directly as battle buddies or through contractors around the county. And this is an initiative that I want to see grow, because the fact of the matter is that veterans are civic assets and leaders. They understand team, they understand mission. And they need to be able to do this without any allegiance to a particular organization like the Department of Mental Health or UCLA or USC. To put that in there, Gene, but because of their mission. And we need to provide platforms for veterans to come back and have purpose and belonging as a part of their reentry. This is one of those examples. And at the end of the day, I would say the Battle Buddy model, if we really, really leverage it, will not only have veterans doing this work for other veterans, but for other communities that are suffering, because these are people, if given the chance, as a general statement, get the job done. And this is not easy work. We know that. Last thing, this is just relative to what I'm speaking about. I put together this slide about the investment. What we want to see is we want to see the green grow. We want the yellow to become effective and adequate, and we want to shrink the red. That's our goal. And if we really, really do the things that we're talking about, and we double down and we leverage what Gene had mentioned about the restorative care villages on all of our health campuses, which will allow us to actually replace the jail with care environments, that's what's going to happen. We're going to shrink the red. That's it. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So I'm Tricia Lester. First of all, I want to say thank you, John, for that amazing talk. I think nobody can listen to that and not be in admiration and gratitude for your leadership, which has been bold and creative and compassionate and always principle driven, where you have people at the center of all of this complexity. I was going to say crazy complexity, but I'll hold on that word. Okay. But I'm here to field questions that I think you may have for Dr. Sharon. I have one of my own about the future, and that is from your perspective of doing this role for 5.5 years and really deeply understanding how the mental health system in our state and our county work. What do you consider, you're speaking to leaders, future leaders, current leaders, people who have dedicated their lives to this field. What can we do collectively? What are our top priorities in terms of the public university, the public systems? What should we have on our immediate radar for achieving some of these goals that you've laid out?
Well, that's a simple question. I thought we were friends. Look, these are collective problems, and they will require collective solutions all day long. One of the things I really love about the partnership with UCLA is that we're leveraging each other's strengths. And we've, in my opinion, just started doing that. I'll give an example of something that I would look to UCLA and I would say the UC system to think about and the governor to think about. And that is, if we drive all of the funding and we create systems to support chasing and achieving outcomes, the system itself will transform. How do you identify those outcomes? How do you collect the data to demonstrate that they're actually occurring? And how do you figure out what types of outcomes can be achieved with a certain amount of resource? And I've asked the governor, and I've talked to the board of supervisors, and I've talked to anyone that would listen or pretend to listen, that the University of California is that brain trust who could help do those types of analyses, inform the state, and then have the state come to the me's of the state and say, here's how much money you have. These are the outcomes that we want you to achieve. Report on the outcomes and go for it. And use whatever tools, what other programs, what other practices, whatever policies you want to achieve them flexibly. Flexible use of the funding to achieve outcomes. UCLA and the University of California schools, I think, would be very well poised to do that. And in the context of doing it, things like IMD exclusion, things like funding for housing, things like focus on employment and social determinants, I believe will fall into place because they'll have to fall into place for us to achieve those goals. And I'd like to think that instead of having to do an obstacle course to braid different funding streams and to send piles of reports up to the state, and then for the state and the Fed to say, oh, well, we like half of the files, but we don't like the other half because you didn't check the right box. You got the code wrong. It doesn't reflect what's written in the chart. We're taking back your money. And at the same time that you have staff, and you all would know this, who are exhausted by having to spend so much time taking care of the chart and the auditor, as opposed to the human being that they studied and had devoted their life to do.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think this is a great model for UC and a public system working together. There's been a lot of interest across the state, and there's also some models in ACEs screening that are partnerships between UCSF and UCLA that hopefully will also add to that.
Yep.
So I wanted to see, we have questions, Dr. Martyr and then Dr. DeBonis.
Hi, John. First of all, LA County has been fortunate to have a leader with your kind of vision. So that's great. Among our residents now, there's a longing to be trained in an environment where they could treat underserved populations. Could you talk about how UCLA can make that happen? Because it's been very challenging.
Yeah, it has been challenging, and it's been kind of a focus of mine. And while I will, no offense, Chancellor, I'll take most of the ownership of the challenge. It's not all the county. Big bureaucratic institutions are not easy to kind of move. I remember working at Edelman, a clinic, a mental health, a DMH clinic when I was a young, spry resident. And that was really the only opportunity, but we have expanded the offerings, and we actually now have resident rotations with the home team. So we got residents, and not just from UCLA, who are actually in the street. That's the work that I do. The clinical work that I do is with the home team as a street psychiatrist. That's an incredible training opportunity. It's an innovative program. It's being jiggered and rejiggered and invented in real time. It has implications about policy, laws, regulations. So I think it's happening, Steve, but it's not happening near as much as it could. The other thing that I was trying to do was to get fourth year moonlighting opportunities, because I know when I was a fourth year, I moonlit at Step Up on 2nd Street, I believe. Yes, which is one of our contractors, which is a great thing. I mean, why not have our fourth years do that, get accustomed to the system, including things like the chart, and then say, I want to devote my time to the public system, and I'll take the 250 over 5 years. I wish it were more. As I told you, the partnership doesn't just focus on prevention and fixing systems for people who have been in systems involved for so long, but it's also meant to focus on the pipeline. And it's happening, and it should happen more and more. And I would like to see that be a focus of this partnership.
Hi, thanks for the excellent talk and for all that you've done for the county. My question is a kind of process emotional question. You've talked about the bureaucratic challenges quite a bit and how long it's taken to implement some of the changes that you've wanted to for the county. I'm wondering if you could speak to the strategies that you've learned over the last several years in managing the frustration that goes along with working within a large bureaucratic system, and how to not succumb to frustration and helplessness and keep your eye on the prize.
That's a tough question. It's a personal question, and there's no easy answer. I guess at a high level, what I would say is that these systems are, intentionally or unintentionally built to not change. They're machines, and they roll and they end up grinding along, and they will often chew people up and spit them out. The more that you try to change the system, the more you're jumping into the wood chipper. So you have to balance the amount of change that you actually want to or are trying to focus on achieving with how punishing it can be. I have always had a flaw, trying to do too much. I did it at the VA, I did it at the county. I mean, and the Board of Supervisors, who, by the way, have been unbelievably supportive of me. Unbelievably supportive. They basically said, run with it. We hired you because we wanted a change agent, run with it. But I mean, I guess what I would say to you is that you have to balance what you really want to achieve with what's feasible, and recognize that changing these systems, these machines, takes a long, long period of time. I mean, when it comes to psychiatrists, yes, it took 3 years to get the loan repayment, but now there's a loan repayment. There's an ordinance for it. That'll never go away. That's a big deal for recruitment. It puts us at par with the Kaisers of the world. And the mission drives everything. What's right drives everything. And I think that's what really keeps the people in the county going in general, is a focus on how important the work is and how fulfilling their days are when they go home, because they know that they've helped somebody that had great need. And, sometimes the balance tilts. And we have people that are exhausted by doing medical charts. They're exhausted by having ideas about how to change their clinic for the betterment of their community that don't get heard or don't get responded to. In large bureaucracies, in my role, probably 90% of that stuff doesn't get to me for whatever reason. So it's not a simple answer. I think I have learned that my aspirations at times have created problems for me, because I've tried to do too much, and I've worked really, really hard, and I've been very frustrated. I would say, though, in sum, it's been an incredible experience and a lifetime honor to have this role.
Any last question? Oh, sorry, Dr. Cahigas.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharon, for your talk. I had a short exchange with Chancellor Block this morning about UCLA becoming a Hispanic serving institution, and he said we should become the Hispanic serving institution. LA County is almost 50% Hispanic or Latinx. What opportunities do you see to form some synergy around better serving our Hispanic or Latinx population?
Well, I mean, there's a ton of opportunity, and I think it's core to the work that we've done and that we continue to do. We're in the process right now of getting the Center of Excellence to train the departmental staff and our contractor staff around cultural and language barriers to the Hispanic population. We, I believe, through our promoter or promotora program, have been doing that. Through our community ambassador network, we've been helping to improve, literacy and cultural sensitivity now for a couple of years. But we want to expand that, and we want to double down on things that are fundamental access barriers, and they really ought to be access opportunities, because people, when they're engaged in a way that feels safe, are going to actually get care.
So it's 11 now. I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you to Chancellor Block for coming down and being in his home department. And thank you, Dr. Sharon, for all that you do and have done and will do.
Thank you. Thanks very much.